The Walt Disney Company keeps remaking movies from my childhood, and I'm sick of it. Not really. What I really am sick of is this endless barrage of reviews, just bashing these movies for being generically bad when they are just parroting something they heard someone else say online. It's an echo chamber of people yelling that this thing is bad without knowing why bad, and instead just getting angry and screaming bad like a Roger Ebert caveman. Editor, put that up.
I hated this movie. That's a statement I've made many times while leaving the screening room, and now here are some of the affronts to my taste, my intelligence, and my patience that inspired my revenge in some hate-filled reviews.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was imagining. Look, I rewatched every single one of these movies that I'm going to be talking about in this video. So if you have a problem, please go ahead, comment it down below whenever that occurs, and I'd be happy to discuss this with you. But all of these opinions are mine, formed by me while watching and notating and looking into all of these movies and analyzing them pretty deeply to figure out, why can't Disney remake a good live-action movie? These movies are all bad for a reason. Realistically, they're more a disappointment for a reason. With a few exceptions, I wouldn't call these movies bad, just a letdown from what we expected them to be. Now, the Lion King remake? That was bad. And we'll get into exactly why it was bad than just nebulously screaming at Jon Favreau through internet forums that he's gonna continue to ignore. But before we get into The Lion King, we have to start way back in 1996, before most of my audience was born. We need to go back to 101 Dalmatians. This movie was made into a live-action remake by Stephen Herek and John Hughes. This movie was alright, I guess. On a rewatch in modern day, this movie was fine. It didn't break any new ground, but it was a very inoffensive movie across the board. Critically, the movie did meh. Glenn Close brings the movie from pretty bad to pretty mid, in my opinion, due to her being just a fantastic actress. When most people think of live-action remakes of their favorite Disney movies, their minds rarely jump to this one first. It might just be because it's so old, but frankly, I just think it's a very inoffensive whatever movie. The reason most people don't think about the 96 101 Dalmatians movie is because the movie was just that inoffensive. Overall, it was fine at best, but by no means was it catastrophically terrible. It didn't get people talking about it. The original 101 Dalmatians movie also was just fine. I mean, Pongo's cute, but it's just not really a remarkable movie at all. And yes, before you comment down below, I'm very well aware of the Rudyard Kipling Jungle Book movie that we are omitting currently because it was more of an adaptation of the 1894 novelization rather than the Disney movie. Thank you very much. The next live-action movie would be well over a decade later, with the release of Alice in Wonderland's live-action adaptation. This movie, again, was very inoffensive. It starred Johnny Depp, and it had Helena Bonham Carter, it had Anne Hathaway, and it had Alice portrayed by an Australian actress whose name I cannot pronounce, but her name is on the screen here. This movie I enjoyed a lot as a kid, and on a rewatch, it actually still holds up quite a bit. It's really good. In fact, I can still recite most of the Jabberwocky poem from memory to this day because I am such a big fan of Alice in Wonderland books and the series, and I just love the word Jub Jub Bird. It's just so dumb and silly and zany and cute. However, there's one glaring problem with this movie, as despite the fact that I love it so much, it is credited for starting a whole problem. From here, the quality in movies began to either stagnate or decline. It's two different eras. Where 101 Dalmatians, or the forgettable sequel 102 Dalmatians, were inoffensive and forgettable films, Alice in Wonderland was a top box office hit the year it came out. However, from that point on, a lot of the things that Alice did right became warped and twisted, like something out of a Junji Ito book. Alice combined old and new, nostalgic and innovative to create a whole new movie, while also making people remember the original poems. While a critical lens can evaluate this as a good movie, Disney executives and the marketing team saw people liked this because it was an Alice in Wonderland remake, not because it was a uniquely good movie. It was a uniquely good movie, but that just seemed ancillary to the team who started to make these movies in the future. As the years tread on, the quality would just drop lower and lower, starting with... Look, The Sorcerer's Apprentice isn't a bad movie. It's a victim of the same thing Tron Legacy was a victim of. Both movies appealing to someone when they were, I guess, just really appealing to me. I don't know. I guess that these movies were made for someone, but it doesn't feel like they knew who they were supposed to be appealing to. I honestly feel that I'm the only person that enjoys them. These movies mark the beginning of what I like to call the Stagnation Period. There is no movie that was as good as Alice in Wonderland, but some of them were not exactly absurdly awful. The movies were The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Maleficent, Cinderella, The Jungle Book, and finally the sequel to Alice, Alice Through the Looking Glass. None of these movies are particularly bad, with The Jungle Book and Maleficent being pretty good. Like I said, in my opinion, none of these movies are as good as Alice, but none of them are catastrophically poorly. We don't really talk about them. But these movies fail to do something important. They fail to innovate. While Maleficent is a wholly unique movie based on something, ergo it doesn't really belong in this video, but I felt that I had to talk about it anyways. And the same goes for Alice 2, and somewhat Sorcerer's Apprentice, I guess. It's based on Fantasia, but it's based on a very small section of Fantasia. Cinderella and The Jungle Book are more or less just nothing new. They're both fine movies. They did all right, but I wasn't blown away by either of them on a rewatch, but they were both equally inoffensive. I like Jungle Book a little more than Cinderella, but they were both just sort of live-action remakes of the old animated movies. This is the first example of why these live-action remakes are simply doomed to fail. These fail to innovate. While they do critically okay by capitalizing on nostalgia bait, this gives the movies a license to do nothing new, and instead recreate a movie that already existed in order to redistribute it to a brand new audience. While Alice did something new, as so did 101 Dalmatians to a degree, Cinderella is remarkably similar to the first movie and just refuses to change anything or innovate or anything of the sort. The next time period that we have to talk about is what I would refer to as steady decline and eventually rapid decline. Beginning with Beauty and the Beast and going through Dumbo, Aladdin, Lion King, Lady and the Tramp, Mulan, Pinocchio, Peter Pan and Wendy, and finally ending with the most recent movie on this list, The Little Mermaid. There's not a single movie here that I would give more than a 5 out of 10 to, and here's why. These movies pick one of two paths: doing literally nothing new, or when attempting to do something new, falling flat on their face. Beauty and the Beast, it's just the same movie with absolutely nothing new. This time there's a bunch of CGI on the Beast and on the artifacts sitting around the house, whether it's the teapot or the candelabra, and it just makes it feel really uncanny valley across the board. Dumbo is a movie that was so forgettable that I forgot about it when I was writing the script, and only when I was recording did I remember that it actually did happen and wasn't just some weird fever dream. Dumbo's most notable attributes are being weirdly racist with those crows and having a very mid-ride at the Disney parks. Who actually cares about this movie? Aladdin made baffling choices, like blue-facing Will Smith, choosing a cast that was adequate at best, and simply just remaking the original movie without Robin Williams or any of the tact, fun, or care that the original movie had. It's still weirdly racist, and the songs are now worse, the acting's now worse, and the subtlety in certain areas is just worse. It's just a 60% version of Aladdin. Alright, fine. I alluded to it at the top of this video, but here you go. The Lion King is not a live-action remake of a movie. You can stop typing your comment now, or continue typing your comment so that way I can argue with you and then give you the timestamp and tell you that you're wrong. It's just not, technically. It's a hyper-realistic, photorealistic, live-action-ish, because the background's live-action, but everything's CG. There's no human in this movie. This is actually the movie that sparked this entire idea for this video concept in the first place. Imagine me, curled up in bed, thinking of concepts to make video essays on when I see the new Little Mermaid trailer. I watch it and think, okay, this can't be worse than the Lion King remake, right? And I start to think. Lion King was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, and that movie was really awful. What could be worse than the Lion King remake? The answer I came up with after about an hour of fighting back and forth? Nothing. Nothing could be worse than the 2019 Lion King movie. Human Centipede was a movie that I enjoyed more than the Lion King remake because it doesn't feel like an insult to my childhood. It felt like an insult to human decency, but that was the intention of the film. The Lion King is an insult to a movie that brought me up as a young kid. The 2019 remake is a fully remade, shot-for-shot remake of the original movie that was directed by the genius Rob Minkoff and written by a slew of talented writers. It features James Earl Jones, Matthew Broderick, Jeremy Irons, Rowan Atkinson, and more, each making their own individual parts something special, something unforgettable. What the 2019 remake did was just take everything that was there and approximate it. It's the best word that I could use. It's a rough equivalent of this movie. Another funny British actor who could play a bird? Who needs Rowan Atkinson? We have John Oliver. Who can convey the comedy and emotion that Ernie Sabella did as Pumbaa? Well, of course, just go get Seth Rogen. He's not working on anything. He's also funny. Matthew Broderick brought Simba to life through the animated film with his voice work and range. Donald Glover does fine at best. He's not a voice actor. James Earl Jones returned for the remake, but it just feels like the entire movie that he wants to go home. He wants that paycheck and he wants to leave. I could do a whole different video essay on this film entirely, so I'm going to leave you with this. This is a disappointment and a tragedy to me, and here's why. This movie did not have soul. It did not have emotion. It did not have a cast that actually cared. Let's look at another universally panned movie, The Room. That movie is an awful movie due to its awful direction, bad writing, and just all of Tommy Wiseau. But that movie had soul. It had heart. It had a cast that thought they were doing something amazing. This movie has a cast getting a big paycheck, a huge paycheck, and just leaving it all on the floor. Effectively, it's an animated movie, but it's just a shot-for-shot remake of the original film where the emotion and the nuance is left on the cutting room floor. Animals don't emote like that. They can't have this or that because of the realism we're trying to achieve. Well, guess what, Jon Favreau? Even the source material The Lion King is based on, Hamlet, the play written by Shakespeare, that play has a ghost in it multiple times. If you want to call that realism, fine, go ahead. But from where I'm sitting, this story, the core story at the heart of this, was never meant to be realistic. With that out of the way, and keeping that very clearly in mind, let's take a look at the rest of the movies. Lady and the Tramp was a B-tier Disney film with one memorable scene that was remade without a heart, without a soul, or frankly, without even a left foot. Mulan had a whole ton of controversy around it that I do not have the time, nor energy, nor expertise to get into right now, but the movie was bad on its own merit. No Mushu, a random phoenix that should have made me happy but instead made me more sad than anything, and catering to Eastern audiences hand over fist instead of making a coherent film, it's effectively the equivalent of putting a Bacon Western Double America burger in a movie so that way people will go and see the movie. Which is basically the entire point of the Fast and Furious franchise, so I don't know why I'm that upset about this. It's soulless, heartless, useless, and just pointless. I thought the movie was terrible, personally. Pinocchio and Peter Pan and Wendy. I'm going to cover these two movies together, because despite watching both for this movie, I hardly remember either of them. Both were bad, just useless and unnecessary. Pinocchio was weird and strange, and Peter Pan and Wendy was the most unnecessary remake of the Peter Pan story ever. It reframed things to just make Hook more sympathetic, I guess? It was a messy, unnecessary film that was awful, in my opinion. Finally, The Little Mermaid. It just cut random things. The movie was longer, with 3 extra songs that just all kind of sucked, in my opinion, and added nothing. The casting was strange, the direction was strange, and this is another movie that I could talk about for hours, about why it was just kind of unnecessary. My favorite part was Javier Bardem, because it was great to just see him in a role where he could just choose scenery, but I don't really have time to explain everything that was so suboptimal, so I'll give you 3 very simple reasons. Flounder's face, Sebastian's face, and the entire song Scuttlebutt.
Oh, please let this be the day.
It breaks my heart to see these movies get made again and again, but people rush to the box office just for something meh. I don't understand why, aside from nostalgia bait, but it just seems that they're garnering so much money. People see that there's a remake of their favorite film out in theaters, and then they rush to buy a ticket. It sucks, it's dumb, but it's the unfortunate reality of the market that we live in today. These movies are doomed to fail until eventually the heart and soul gets re-injected back in. I hate to end on a dour note, but that's really it at the end of the day. Vote with your wallets and speak out online. At the end of the day, I hate these movies, and I won't shut up about it until Disney does something about it. So I encourage you to do the same. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you liked the video, please go ahead and like the video. Subscribe for more deep dive hot takes like this, because next week we're covering a sequel to my Barbenheimer video. We're talking about opposite tonal releases yet again. See you next week. Au revoir.